So if you're starting a business and you're not sure whether you should incorporate or not, the answer is, as per usual, it depends. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense to incorporate, sometimes it doesn't. Some people will say that incorporating is always the best, and I used to feel that way too, but I definitely don't anymore. It really does depend on your situation. Sometimes incorporating makes a ton of sense and it's just really clear cut that you should do that, and other times it doesn't. It's the same with anything, right? Some people say that renting a house or renting an apartment is stupid and doesn't make sense, but really there are some situations where that does make more sense. So it's the same with incorporating. And I'll give you a couple examples of where it would make sense to incorporate and where it probably wouldn't make sense to incorporate. So for the first example, one scenario where it would probably make sense to incorporate would be, let's say if you want to start a landscaping company with you and 2 or 3 of your friends, and you all want to be part owners of this company. With the company, you're going to need to purchase quite a bit of vehicles and equipment, trucks and bobcats and trailers and other equipment to do the landscaping work. There's a chance that maybe one of those original owners might leave the company, or you might want to take on another owner after the original owner set up the business. Let's say maybe you are open to selling the landscaping company at some point in the future. Also, you're planning on growing the business to be pretty big. You want to have some, multiple crews working, doing landscaping. You want your revenue to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, if not higher. And you're planning on doing some snow removal in the winter months if you're living somewhere where there is snow removal. And so you're going to be really busy almost year round, with maybe the exception of November when the main landscaping season is over, but there hasn't been much for snow removal yet. So typically taxes are going to be done in February and March, but that's when you're kind of finishing up your snow removal season. So maybe you'd like to do your taxes in October, November, when that's the slowest time of year for you. And maybe the owners of the company are going to work in different amounts. Maybe 2 of the owners want to be full-time employees, and the 3rd or 4th owners, they're just kind of part-time employees. They have full-time jobs. They want to be owners, but they're not really going to be that involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. So in this example, it's pretty clear to me that this typically would make most sense to incorporate for a number of reasons. Number one, with a corporation, you can have multiple owners in a more of a formal way where they can actually own shares of the company. And it's easier for one of them to leave or a new one to come on board and be a part owner in that type of company. Another reason is because of the income. If this is going to be like $1 million per year business, incorporating just gives you more flexibility in terms of what you're doing with that revenue, how you're claiming your expenses, how you're paying out employees and owners and things like that. Another reason is because this business is going to own some expensive vehicles and equipment, and I think generally just makes more sense to set up a corporation so that those assets can be tied to the corporation rather than to the individuals. Another reason is because with the industry of landscaping, there is a little bit more risk, a little bit more liability. If you're working on people's properties and doing some pretty big overhauls, using big equipment, things can go wrong. So it's maybe better to have a corporation because it then separates the liability of the owners from the corporation. And so there's more protection for the individuals because the corporation takes a lot of the liability. Another reason to incorporate in this situation is because of tax strategy. So because I mentioned maybe the slowest time of year is November, and ideally they would like to do their taxes in November, you can't really change the tax year with an unincorporated business. So it's going to be that January until December tax year. Whereas with a corporation, you can change it. So they could make their tax year, finish at the end of September or the end of October rather than the end of December. A corporation would probably also make more sense here so that you can set up a bank account and even credit cards that are tied to the corporation rather than to the individuals. And lastly, if you have owners that are taking different responsibility, working different amounts, it can work out a little bit better because if it's a corporation, you can just pay the owners as employees or you can pay them as owners in dividends. So if 2 of those owners are working as full-time employees, you can set them up on payroll as full-time employees and they're getting paid hourly for everything they're doing. Whereas if the other 2 owners are not really working as employees, they're kind of just on the sidelines, helping make decisions. Maybe they've invested some money, they're helping with the accounting or something like that and not really putting in much time. They could just be paid as owners with dividends rather than a salary. Or if they're just doing the odd job helping out, they could just get paid as kind of a subcontractor where they're just getting paid an hourly wage. So in that case, if you're having different amounts of contribution from the owners, you don't really have to worry about arguing over who's putting in more time, who's putting in more work, when everyone's getting compensated fairly based on that setup. Again, whether that's salary or subcontractor payment or just collecting a dividend. So setting up as a corporation allows for more flexibility in that way. And so that's why, with all those reasons in that situation, it makes more sense to incorporate. And for a second example where it probably wouldn't make much sense to incorporate would be, let's just say that you're setting up your own home-based business and it's just you and you're doing some type of counseling or consulting. Maybe you're, an occupational health and safety consultant, and you're mostly just working from home and then visiting clients out in the field. It's just you. You don't have any employees. You don't plan to have any employees. You don't have any equipment. Your revenue isn't going to be super high. You're basically just trying to make a living for yourself. As far as tax season goes, maybe it doesn't matter very much. You're fine with filing your taxes, February, March, and April. You're also not planning on selling the business or taking on other owners, and you'll probably never have employees. In this case, I think it just makes a lot more sense to be a proprietorship. There may be some exceptions. I typically need to talk to someone one-on-one before I can decide what makes most sense. But this scenario generally would make more sense to just operate your business as a proprietorship. You still could incorporate and there would be some benefits, but I feel like the benefits don't outweigh the extra costs, because when you do incorporate, it is more money to do that. It is more time. It is more administrative work, and it's just more to think about and more strategy that's required in doing that. Where that can be super beneficial for some situations, it's not worth it in other situations.